The life of a medieval knight is a fascinating subject, steeped in tradition, valor, and a strong sense of duty. In order to fully understand the world of these armored warriors, we must first travel back in time to the Middle Ages, a period that extended roughly from the 5th to the 15th century. Picture, if you will, a world of towering stone castles, vast open fields, and the clattering sound of steel on steel echoing through the air. This was the world of the medieval knight, a world defined by chivalry, warfare, and the intricate social hierarchy of feudalism. Knights were often of noble birth, part of the aristocratic class that ruled the land. They were trained in the art of warfare and expected to uphold the knightly virtues of bravery, honor, and loyalty to their liege lord. But the life of a knight was not all about combat. In fact, it was a complex, multifaceted existence that involved a deep understanding of social norms, a commitment to religious duties, and a strong sense of community and responsibility. The journey to becoming a knight began early, often when a boy was just 7 years old. At this tender age, the future knight would leave his family home and start his training as a page in the household of a lord. This period of his life was focused on learning the basic skills he would need as a knight, including horse riding, weaponry, and hunting. But his education wasn't purely physical. The page would also receive instruction in reading, writing, music, and the Christian faith. He would learn about the codes of chivalry, the importance of honor, and the expectations of his class. After 7 years as a page, at around the age of 14, the young man would graduate to the role of a squire. This was a more advanced stage in his training, where he would serve directly under a knight, acting as his shield bearer and assistant. This was a crucial time in a knight's formation, as it offered him first-hand experience of the knightly life. He would accompany his knight to tournaments and battles, learn about strategy and tactics, and understand the realities of warfare. The squire would also take on more responsibilities, often caring for his knight's horse and equipment. The life of a squire was not an easy one, but it was a necessary stepping stone on the path to knighthood. It was during this time that the young man would truly prove his worth and show that he had the potential to become a knight. His skills, character, and understanding of his role would be tested, and only those who passed these tests would be considered for the honor of knighthood. The final step in a knight's journey was the dubbing ceremony, a solemn and significant event that marked his official entry into the ranks of knighthood. The ceremony was often conducted by the knight's liege lord, who would bestow upon him the title of knight, usually by tapping him on the shoulder with a sword. This was an incredibly important moment in a knight's life, symbolizing his transition from squire to knight and his acceptance into the chivalric community. Once knighted, the warrior would lead a life of service and duty, bound by the codes of chivalry to protect the weak, serve his lord faithfully, and uphold the honor of his name. He would be expected to demonstrate bravery in battle, wisdom in council, and a deep commitment to his religious duties. The life of a medieval knight was certainly one of privilege, but it was also one of great responsibility and sacrifice. To be a knight was to embody the ideals of chivalry, to serve one's lord and community with unwavering dedication, and to navigate the complex social and political landscape of the feudal system. As we delve deeper into the world of the medieval knight, we will explore the many facets of their lives, from their training and duties to their role in society and their influence on the development of the Middle Ages. The life of a knight was far more than just the clashing of swords and jousting tournaments. It was a life of honor, duty, and deep commitment to a set of ideals that continue to inspire us to this day. So let's journey together into this fascinating era and discover the true essence of what it was like to be a medieval knight. In the early life of a knight, much like in the lives of many young boys in the medieval period, a strong emphasis was placed on training for warfare. From a very young age, usually around 7, boys of noble birth were sent to live with a lord as a page, where they would begin their education in the arts of war and chivalry. This was not an easy life, nor was it short. The training of a knight lasted typically until the age of 21, a lengthy period of 14 years. The first few years of this period were focused mainly on basic physical training. The young pages were taught to ride horses, handle weapons, and were given a rigorous physical regimen to build strength and endurance. They were also taught the basics of chivalry, the code of conduct that governed the behavior of knights. This included lessons on honor, courage, loyalty, and respect for women. These lessons were not just theoretical, they were very much a part of everyday life for a knight. Even at this early stage, the pages were expected to adhere to this code, and any deviation was met with harsh punishment. As the boys grew older and their skills improved, they progressed to the stage of being a squire. This was a significant step up from being a page. Squires were the personal assistants to knights, and as such, they were given more responsibilities and were expected to participate in actual combat training. They were taught how to use various types of weapons, such as swords, lances, and bows. They practiced combat tactics, learned how to wear and maintain armor, and were even trained in the art of jousting. Despite the harshness and rigidity of their training, squires were not without their moments of leisure. They were often allowed to participate in tournaments, which were grand events that combined the thrill of combat with the pageantry of a festival. Tournaments were important social events and a chance for squires to show off their skills and earn recognition. They were also an opportunity for squires to hone their combat skills in a relatively safe environment, as the weapons used in tournaments were usually blunted. The life of a squire was not all about training for war, however. They were given a well-rounded education that included lessons in reading, writing, and arithmetic. They were taught the principles of feudalism, the political and social system that governed medieval Europe, and were expected to understand and uphold these principles. Squires were also introduced to the finer points of courtly etiquette, learning how to behave in the presence of lords and ladies, how to speak eloquently, and how to conduct themselves with dignity and grace. After years of rigorous training and education, a squire would finally be ready to become a knight. This was a momentous occasion, marked by a grand ceremony known as the accolade. The squire would be dressed in a white tunic, symbolizing purity, and a red robe, symbolizing the blood he was willing to shed for his lord. He would kneel before his lord, who would then tap him on the shoulders with a sword, officially bestowing upon him the title of knight. Once a man had become a knight, he was expected to serve his lord in battle, protect the weak and defenseless, and uphold the principles of chivalry. He was given a fief, a plot of land, as a reward for his service, and was expected to manage this fief and its inhabitants. He was also expected to participate in tournaments, which served as both a form of entertainment and a way to maintain and improve his combat skills. The life of a medieval knight was not easy, but it was one of great honor and responsibility. From a young age, knights were trained to be warriors, leaders, and upholders of the social order. They were expected to live by a strict code of conduct, which demanded courage, honor, and loyalty. Despite the hardships and dangers they faced, knights were respected and admired figures in medieval society. They were the epitome of the medieval ideal of the warrior aristocrat, a combination of martial prowess and noble values. From the rigorous training of their youth to the demands of their adult lives, knights were shaped by the unique challenges and responsibilities of their position in society. They were more than just warriors. They were symbols of the values and ideals of their time. The life of a medieval knight was a life of duty, honor, and sacrifice, a life dedicated to serving others and upholding the principles of chivalry. As we turn the page on the life of a medieval knight, we delve deeper into the intricacies of their training. The process was not one to be taken lightly, nor was it a short journey. It was a journey that began in childhood and culminated in a life of service and honor. It was not uncommon for the sons of nobles to start their training as early as 7 years old. They would be taken under the wing of a more experienced knight, usually a close relative, or a knight in service to their family, who would serve as their mentor and guide through the early years of their training. These early years were often spent in the household of their mentor, a period known as pagehood. During this time, they were taught basic skills such as horse riding, hunting, and basic combat skills. But it was not all about physical training. The young pages were also expected to learn about the chivalric codes, the religious doctrines, and the social etiquette of the time. They would serve in the household, learning humility and obedience, and gaining a practical understanding of how a knightly household was run. As they grew older and more skilled, usually around the age of 14, the young pages would graduate to the rank of squire. Now their training intensified. They would practice with a variety of weapons, including swords, lances, and bows. They would learn to fight in armor, to joust, and to participate in mock battles. The squires were also responsible for maintaining their knights' equipment, a task that taught them the importance of keeping their gear in top condition. They would sharpen the swords, polish the armor, and take care of the horses. Yet, their duties were not limited to the battlefield. They served as personal attendants to their knights, aiding them in all matters, from dressing to eating. This close relationship allowed them to observe and emulate the behavior of their mentors. The squires would also accompany their knights to tournaments and battles, providing them with first-hand experience of what their future role would entail. After several years of rigorous training, the squire would finally be ready for the knighthood. The ceremony of knighthood was a solemn and religious affair, often taking place in a church. The night before the ceremony, the squire would undergo a ritual purification, known as the Vigil of Arms. They would pray and fast, preparing themselves spiritually for the responsibilities that lay ahead. On the day of the ceremony, the squire would be dressed in a white tunic, symbolizing purity, a red robe, signifying nobility, and a black doublet, representing mortality. They would then kneel before the Lord, or the knight, who was to dub them. The Lord would tap the squire on each shoulder with a sword, a practice known as the accolade. With this action, the squire would become a knight, ready to serve their lord and protect their land. The road to knighthood was long and arduous, but it molded these young boys into men of honor, courage, and skill. They were not just warriors, but also protectors of the weak, upholders of justice, and embodiments of the chivalric codes. The life of a knight was not an easy one, but it was one filled with purpose and respect, a life that many aspired to, yet few achieved. As we continue in the life of a medieval knight, we will explore the duties and responsibilities that came with the title, the challenges they faced, the role they played in the society they helped shape, and the legacy they left behind. For now, let the resonating clang of swords, the echo of hooves, and the rustling of armor lull you into a restful slumber as we delve deeper into the fascinating world of the medieval knight in our next section. As we continue our journey through the life of a medieval knight, we now find ourselves in the heart of the knight's adolescence. This was when a page transitioned into the role of a squire, a position of increased responsibility and proximity to the knightly ideal. This period was marked by rigorous physical training and a deeper immersion into the codes of chivalry, which would lay the foundation for the squire's eventual ascension to knighthood. The age of 14 was usually when a page would become a squire. However, the transition was not merely a matter of course. It required the recommendation of his knight mentor, who would only give it if he believed the young man was ready. This readiness was judged not only on physical prowess, but also on the squire's understanding and adherence to the chivalric code. Once a page was promoted to the status of a squire, he was assigned to a knight for whom he would act as a personal aide. Apart from the continuation of his studies in reading, writing, music, and the moral codes of chivalry, the squire also began a more intense physical regimen designed to prepare him for the rigors of warfare. He would learn to ride while wearing armor, wield a sword, and use a lance. He would become proficient in the techniques of the mounted charge and the hand-to-hand combat that often followed. He would also learn how to care for a horse, a knight's most valued companion in battle. During this period, the squire would also attend tournaments, not only as an observer, but also as a participant. Tournaments were grand affairs, often attended by nobility from far and wide. The squire would assist his knight, carrying his weapons, and even standing in for him if the knight was unable to compete. Tournaments were not solely about martial prowess. They were also social occasions, where the codes of chivalry were displayed and reinforced. The squire would observe how the knight interacted with his peers, how he treated those of lower status, and how he conducted himself with women, particularly the ladies of the court. The squire would learn that being a knight was not just about being a warrior. It also meant being a diplomat, a leader, and a figure of moral authority. A squire's training was not limited to the physical and social aspects. He was also taught the arts of strategy and tactics, learning how to command troops in battle, how to lay siege to a castle, and how to defend one. He would study the great battles of the past and the commanders who led them, absorbing the lessons they offered. The period of being a squire was a challenging time, often marked by long hours, hard work, and intense discipline. However, it was also a time of camaraderie, as the squire would develop close relationships with the other squires in the service of the same knight. They would train together, learn together, and often compete against each other, all under the watchful eye of their knight mentor. The transition from squire to knight was not guaranteed. It was an honor that had to be earned. The squire had to prove that he had not only the physical ability, but also the character to bear the title of knight. Only then would he be considered for the accolade, the ceremonial dubbing that marked the passage from squire to knight. As the sun begins to set on the squire's adolescence, we find ourselves at the threshold of the next stage of his journey. We have followed him from his early years as a page, through his rigorous training as a squire, and now we stand on the brink of his transformation into a knight. But that is a tale for another time, another journey into the heart of the medieval world. In our next section, we will explore the ceremony of the accolade, the momentous occasion that marked the squire's transition into knighthood. We will delve into the rituals, the symbolism, and the expectations that came with this elevation in status. But for now, let us take a moment to reflect on the journey so far, to appreciate the dedication, the discipline, and the determination that it took to reach this point. As the day drifts into night, let us dream of knights and chivalry, of honor and duty, of a world long past but never forgotten. As we close this section, allow the soothing rhythm of this narrative to lull you into a peaceful state of relaxation. Let the weight of the day melt away as you imagine the life of a medieval squire, his days filled with rigorous training and his nights spent under the watchful eyes of his knight mentor. As you drift closer to sleep, hold on to this journey into the past and let it guide you into a night of restful dreams. As the sun crests over the horizon, marking the start of another day in the Middle Ages, our young knight in training, now a squire, wakes from his slumber. He rises from a simple wooden bed, his body aching from the previous day's rigorous training. The room he occupies is modest, with little more than a bed, a chest for his belongings, and a small table. A single window allows the morning light to filter in, casting long shadows across the room. His day begins before the rest of the manor stirs. beginning with chores. These were not just a means of keeping the squire busy, but they were also designed to build character and instill a strong work ethic. He would tend to the horses, clean the stables, polish armor, and maintain weapons. Each task was a lesson in responsibility, demonstrating the importance of caring for one's equipment, a lesson that could mean the difference between life and death on the battlefield. As dawn gives way to morning, the squire would join his knight for breakfast. Meals were simple, often consisting of bread, cheese, and sometimes meat or fish. This was also a time for the knight to impart wisdom and knowledge to his squire. They would discuss strategies for combat, the codes of chivalry, and the politics of the realm. The knight, serving as both a mentor and a role model, was instrumental in shaping the squire into a knight himself. Following breakfast, the squire would prepare his knight's armor and weapons for the day. This was a meticulous process, requiring a keen eye and a steady hand. Each piece of armor had to be polished and fitted correctly. The weapons had to be sharp and well balanced. Any slight error could compromise the knight's safety, so the squire would painstakingly ensure everything was in perfect order. Afterwards, the squire would join the other squires and knights in the training yard. The air would be filled with the clanging of steel, the grunts of exertion, and the shouts of instructors. Here, the squire would learn the arts of war, swordsmanship, archery, horsemanship, and the techniques of medieval combat. Training was harsh and demanding, pushing the squire to his limits. But with each passing day, he would grow stronger, faster, and more skilled. In the afternoon, following a brief respite for lunch, the squire would continue his training. He would practice his skills in mock battles, honing his abilities in a safe environment. These mock battles weren't mere child's play. They were a rehearsal for the real battles that lay ahead. The squire would learn how to maneuver in armor, how to react under pressure, and how to work in a team. As day turned to evening, the squire would return to his chores, ensuring that everything was in order for the following day. He would then join his knight for dinner, another opportunity for learning and discussion. Following dinner, the squire would have a brief period of free time. Some squires would use this time to practice their skills. Others would engage in games or storytelling. Despite the demanding schedule, there was camaraderie among the squires, a shared understanding of the challenges they faced. As the night settled in, the squire would retire to his room. He would reflect on the day's events, considering what he had learned and what he needed to improve. Exhausted but satisfied, he would then drift to sleep, ready to face another day of challenges and learning. Thus, the life of a medieval squire was a cycle of hard work, discipline, and constant learning. It was a demanding existence, but one that prepared him for the responsibilities and challenges of knighthood. The road was long and arduous, but for those who persevered, the reward was the honor and prestige of becoming a knight. As we continue our journey through the life of a medieval knight, let us remember the dedication and perseverance of these young men who endured rigorous training in the pursuit of chivalry and honor. In the cold, pre-dawn light, our young knight embarks upon his first true test of valor, his first battle. Clad in his newly earned suit of armor, he mounts his trusty steed, the weight of his sword a comforting presence at his hip. The air is thick with a sense of anticipation, and the ground beneath him vibrates with the restless energy of hundreds of armored men preparing for the chaos that is about to unfurl. As the sun emerges from the horizon, casting long shadows over the shifting sea of steel, our knight, not yet fully a man, has the first taste of the grim reality of his chosen path. Battle, he quickly learns, is not the romanticized clash of honor and glory he had imagined. It is a brutal, chaotic, and terrifying ordeal, a dangerous dance of steel and horseflesh where a single misstep could spell the end. Despite the terror and chaos, The young knight does his duty, fighting doggedly with all the skills he has honed over years of rigorous training. He fights not only for his own survival, but also for the honor of his lord and the safety of his homeland. He learns quickly that the battlefield is not a place for individual glory, but a place where teamwork and discipline reign supreme. Each knight is part of a larger whole, a cog in the grand machine of war, and each has a role to play. Surviving his first battle, our knight returns home a changed man. The naive boy who left is replaced by a battle-hardened warrior, a man who has tasted the bitter reality of war and emerged stronger for it. He carries with him the scars of battle, both physical and mental, as constant reminders of the price he has paid for his knighthood. As years pass, the knight's life becomes a cycle of training, service, and occasional bouts of warfare. He lives by a strict code of chivalry, a set of moral and social rules that govern his every action. He is expected to be the paragon of virtue, to be loyal, courteous, generous, and brave. He is the protector of the weak, the champion of justice, and the defender of his lord's lands. In times of peace, the knight's life is one of service and duty. He acts as the lord's right hand, carrying out his will and ensuring the smooth running of his lands. He oversees the training of new squires, ensuring that the next generation of knights is ready to bear the burden of knighthood. He also acts as a judge, settling disputes among the common folk and ensuring that justice is served. Yet, being a knight is not all duty and warfare. There is also time for leisure and enjoyment. Tournaments are a common pastime for knights, providing an opportunity to display their martial prowess in a less deadly environment than the battlefield. These events are grand spectacles, filled with music, feasting, and merriment. Knights engage in jousting, archery, and melee combat, competing for glory and the favor of the ladies. Speaking of ladies, courtly love is another important aspect of a knight's life. Knights are expected to be courteous and chivalrous towards women, treating them with respect and admiration. A knight would often dedicate his victories in tournaments and battles to a lady, often one who is unattainable due to her high social status or marital status. This unrequited love is viewed as a noble pursuit, a testament to a knight's dedication and virtue. As our knight grows older, the rigors of his duties and the toll of numerous battles begin to weigh heavily on him. His once youthful vigor is replaced by the stoic endurance of a seasoned veteran. Yet, despite the hardships, he carries on, driven by duty and honor, ever the paragon of chivalry and virtue. In the twilight years of his life, our knight may retire to a life of peace, passing on his duties to a younger generation. Yet, he remains a knight until the end, his life a testament to the ideals of chivalry and the harsh realities of the medieval world. He may no longer wear the armor or wield the sword, but he carries with him the indomitable spirit of the knight, a spirit forged in the fires of battle and tempered by a lifetime of duty and service. The life of a medieval knight, as we have seen, is one of duty, honor, and hardship. It is a life chosen by few, but respected by many. It is a life that encapsulates the spirit of the medieval age, a time of great turmoil and change, a time when the ideals of chivalry and the reality of war coexisted in a delicate balance. It is a life that, despite its many challenges, was filled with moments of glory, courage, and honor, moments that continue to capture our imagination and inspire us today. As we delve further into the daily life of a medieval knight, we turn our attention from the ceremonial aspects of knighthood and the lengthy process of becoming a knight to a more personal perspective, the knight's code of chivalry. A code that was not merely a set of rules or laws, but a way of life, shaping every aspect of a knight's existence, from his personal relationships to his conduct on the battlefield. Chivalry derived from the French word chevalier, meaning horseman, was a complex system of ideals and expectations. Knights were expected to demonstrate courage in battle, loyalty to their lord and peers, and a sense of fairness and generosity towards those less fortunate. These expectations were not only moral guidelines, but they were deeply intertwined with a knight's social standing and reputation. A knight's honour, and by extension his societal value, was measured by his adherence to these chivalric principles. Courage, for instance, was not simply a matter of physical bravery. It also encompassed the willingness to confront fear, uncertainty, and intimidation. A knight was expected to face danger head-on, whether that danger took the form of an enemy on the battlefield, a moral quandary, or a personal challenge. This courage extended beyond the physical realm and into the realm of ideals. A knight was expected to stand up for what was right, even when doing so was unpopular or risky. Loyalty, too, was a multifaceted virtue. A knight owed loyalty to his lord, certainly, but also to his fellow knights, to his family, and to the church. This loyalty was not blind or unquestioning. It was a two-way street. Just as a knight was expected to serve his lord faithfully, so too was the lord expected to treat his knights with respect and fairness. This reciprocal relationship formed the backbone of medieval society, with each individual knowing their place and their responsibilities. Fairness and generosity were perhaps the most outwardly visible aspects of the chivalric code. Knights were expected to be just in their dealings with others, to show mercy to defeated opponents, and to provide for those less fortunate than themselves. This expectation extended beyond mere charity. Knights were expected to use their power and influence to right wrongs and to uphold justice. The code of chivalry also extended to a knight's personal relationships. Knights were expected to demonstrate respect and courtesy towards women, a concept that evolved into the romanticized notion of courtly love. This code dictated that a knight should treat his lady with the same reverence and devotion that he showed to his lord. This idealized version of chivalry, however, was not always the reality. As with any societal standard, there were those who fell short of the ideal. There were knights who were cruel, selfish, or cowardly. There were knights who abused their power, who betrayed their lord, or who failed to uphold the standards of fairness and generosity. Yet, it is important to remember that the code of chivalry was not a legal system. It was an ideal, a vision of how a knight should behave. It was a standard to strive for, even if it was not always achieved. And for many knights, the pursuit of this ideal was a lifelong journey, a constant striving to embody the virtues of courage, loyalty, fairness, and generosity. As we continue our exploration of the life of a medieval knight, we will see how this code of chivalry shaped not only the knight's personal life, but also the broader world of medieval Europe. For now, though, take a moment to reflect on the values and ideals encapsulated in the code of chivalry. Imagine what it would be like to live by such a code, to strive each day to embody these virtues. As you do, allow your mind to drift back to the medieval world, a world of knights and nobles, of castles and courts, of loyalty and honor. Let the sounds of that world fill your mind, the clatter of armor, the neighing of horses, the distant tolling of a bell. Allow these sounds to lull you into a state of peaceful relaxation as we continue our journey into the life of a medieval knight. In the life of a medieval knight, the stage of squirehood served as the bridge between early training as a page and eventual knighthood. As a squire, the young nobleman in training would be entrusted with more complex tasks and responsibilities, and his education would take on a more practical tone. This period of a knight's life held great importance, as it was during these years that the foundational skills, knowledge, and values of knighthood were deeply ingrained, shaping the man who would soon take the solemn vows of chivalry. Around the age of 14, the young boy, once a page, would be elevated to the status of squire. This advancement was typically marked by a simple ceremony, during which the boy was presented with a sword belt by his lord or master. The sword belt, while practical in its use, was a potent symbol of the martial responsibilities that the squire was expected to shoulder. It was a visual reminder of the path of courage, strength, and honor that lay ahead. As a squire, the young man would become the constant companion of a knight, serving not only as his assistant in everyday tasks, but also as his attendant in battle. He would be responsible for maintaining the knight's armor, weapons, and horse, ensuring that everything was in top condition. This provided the squire with an intimate knowledge of the tools of a knight's trade, knowledge that would prove invaluable when he himself would take up the mantle of knighthood. Training in martial combat would become more intense during this stage. The squire would practice the skills of horse riding, archery, and swordsmanship, daily under the watchful eye of his mentor. He would also participate in mock battles and tournaments, where he would get a taste of real combat. These exercises were designed not only to hone the squire's physical abilities, but also to instill qualities of bravery, resilience, and strategic thinking. But the life of a squire was not all about physical training and combat. There was a significant emphasis on education and character building as well. The squire would continue his lessons in reading, writing, and arithmetic. He would study the Bible, the works of classical philosophers, and the principles of chivalry. He would also learn about the feudal system, the code of conduct for knights, and the traditions and customs of the court. The squire's character was considered as important, if not more so, than his physical prowess. He was expected to embody the virtues of honesty, loyalty, generosity, and modesty. He was taught to respect all, especially women, and to uphold the principles of justice and fairness. He was reminded that his primary duty as a knight was to protect the weak and the innocent, and to serve his lord and king faithfully. The squire's life was not all work and no play. There was time for recreation and socializing as well. The squire would partake in hunting and falconry, popular pastimes among the nobility. He would attend feasts and dances, where he would learn to navigate the complex social dynamics of the court. These experiences helped to polish the squire's manners and social skills, preparing him for the challenges of courtly life. The duration of squirehood varied from one individual to another, but generally, it lasted until the age of 21. At this point, if the squire had proven his worth through his skills, character, and conduct, he would be eligible for knighthood. The transition from squire to knight was marked by a grand ceremony known as the accolade, where the squire was formally dubbed a knight by his lord or another knight of high standing. In conclusion, the stage of squirehood was a crucial period in the life of a medieval knight. It was a time of intense learning, growth, and transformation. It was during these years that the boy became a man, the trainee became a warrior, and the follower became a leader. The values, skills, and qualities instilled during this stage would guide the knight throughout his life, influencing not only his performance on the battlefield, but also his conduct in the court and his interactions with others. In the next section, we will explore the various aspects of knighthood, including the solemn vows, the roles and responsibilities, and the challenges and rewards. As we continue our exploration of the life of a medieval knight, we've arrived at the point of the evening where we delve into the knightly tournaments. These were not merely idle pastimes, but they held a significant place in the social fabric of the medieval period. The origin of knighthood tournaments can be traced back to the 11th century, when they were initially simple military exercises designed to train knights for war. However, over time, They evolved into elaborate spectacles that attracted attention from all strata of society. Knights from different parts of the kingdom, and even from other countries, would gather to participate in these tournaments, which were often held to celebrate significant events, such as royal weddings, coronations, or victories over enemies. The tournament ground, or lists, was a large open space, usually on the outskirts of a town or castle. It was here the knights would engage in various forms of combat, with the ultimate aim of displaying their martial skills and gallantry. The most iconic of these contests was the joust. Two knights would charge at each other on horseback, each attempting to knock the other from his steed with a lance. The victor would then move on to face other challengers in a series of rounds until a final champion was declared. However, jousting was not the only form of combat in these tournaments. There were also melee combats, where teams of knights would fight each other on foot using a variety of weapons. These could be as chaotic and brutal as real battles, and injuries, even fatalities, were not uncommon. Despite the risks involved, knights eagerly participated in these tournaments. Victory not only brought honor and prestige, but could also mean substantial prizes in the form of money, land, or valuable objects. Moreover, the tournaments were a platform for knights to demonstrate their bravery and skill to potential patrons and benefactors. The tournament was also a social event. It was attended by nobility and commoners alike, and everyone participated in the festivities. There were feasts, music, dancing, and other forms of entertainment. Ladies of the court played an important role in the proceedings. They would often present the prizes to the victors, and the most admired knight would be declared the Queen of Love and Beauty by the most distinguished lady present. These tournaments were not just about combat and revelry, though. They also served to reinforce the chivalric code that knights were expected to adhere to. Knights were expected to fight honorably, respect their opponents, and display courage and loyalty. In fact, a knight who behaved dishonorably could be disqualified or even banned from future tournaments. As we have seen, the life of a medieval knight was not just about warfare and duty. It was also about the pursuit of honor, glory, and personal achievement, and the tournaments provided an ideal platform for this. They were a reflection of the values and ideals of the time, and despite the brutality and danger involved, they remained a popular and enduring feature of medieval society. This concludes our exploration of the life of a medieval knight for this evening. As you drift off into sleep, let your mind wander through the grandeur and the excitement of a medieval tournament. Imagine the thunder of hooves, the clash of armor, and the cheers of the crowd. Picture the bright colors of the knights' shields and banners, the gleaming steel of their weapons, and the elegant ladies watching from the stands. Let these images carry you away to a time of chivalry and valor, and may they inspire dreams of grand adventures and heroic deeds. Good night, and until next time, may your dreams be filled with the gallant knights and fair ladies of the medieval world. As we delve into the life of a medieval knight, we find ourselves in the heart of the feudal system. This societal structure was akin to a pyramid, with the king at the top, followed by nobles, knights, and then serfs or peasants at the bottom. As the second script block begins, we turn our gaze to the training and education of a young noble destined to become a knight. The journey to knighthood began at a tender age. A boy of noble birth, often as young as 7, would be sent away from his family to live in the castle of a lord, who would become his liege. This move was not only to begin the boy's training, but also to strengthen political alliances among the nobility. This boy, or page as he was known, would embark on a rigorous education that extended far beyond combat skills. The training was designed to mold him into a figure embodying the ideals of chivalry and service, qualities central to the knightly ethos. During this phase, the page's day would start before dawn. He would first attend to his duties, which included serving at the Lord's table, caring for the Lord's clothes, and ensuring the cleanliness of the Lord's living quarters. These tasks, seemingly menial, were essential in instilling a sense of humility and the importance of service in the young page. Education formed a key part of the page's day. He would learn to read and write, often in Latin, the lingua franca of the educated in the Middle Ages. He would also study arithmetic and, perhaps most importantly, music. Music was not only for entertainment, but was also seen as a way to make the page more well-rounded and cultured. He would learn to play the lute or the harp, and often he would be required to sing. These skills would later serve him well in the courts of the nobility, where a knight was expected to be as skilled in the arts as he was in warfare. The page's education was not limited to the academic. He would also learn to ride a horse, an essential skill for a knight. Initially, he would ride small ponies before graduating to larger steeds. He would also begin his martial training, learning to wield a wooden sword and shield. This training would occur under the watchful eyes of older knights who would ensure the page was learning the correct techniques and forms. Religion was central to a knight's life, and the page's education would encompass this aspect as well. He would attend church regularly, learning the tenets of Christianity and the importance of faith. The knight was seen as a defender of the faith, and this belief was instilled from a young age. The page would also be taught the code of chivalry, which was a moral and social code that knights were expected to follow. This code emphasized virtues such as bravery, honor, respect for women, and protection of the weak. The page would learn these values not only through instruction, but also by observing the knights and lords around him. After several years of this rigorous education and training, usually around the age of 14, the page would become a squire. This was the next step on his journey to becoming a knight. As a squire, his responsibilities would increase, as would the intensity of his martial training. But that is a story for another time. As we end this section, imagine the young page, a child in many ways, living away from his family and learning the ways of a world that demanded so much of him. His days filled with duty, discipline, and the weight of expectation. Yet also imagine the pride he felt, the anticipation of the day when he would finally earn the right to call himself a knight. This was the beginning of a journey that would shape not only his life, but the entire fabric of the Middle Ages. In the first blush of adulthood, our young knight in training would enter the stage of knighthood known as the squire. This stage was an integral part of the knight's journey, a period of learning and proving one's worth. The young man, often around the age of 14, would leave his family to live with a knight, serving as his attendant while learning the ways of chivalry, combat, and courtly manners. This was not an easy transition, nor was it meant to be. The squire's life was one of service and humility, of polishing armor and grooming horses, of observing and absorbing the ways of the seasoned knights. Squires had a wide range of duties. They assisted knights in battle, often carrying their weapons and shields, ensuring their armor was in good condition, and tending to their horses. They would also serve the knight at meal times, pouring their drinks and cutting their meat. But these chores were not without their rewards. As they served, squires were privy to the conversations of knights and lords, gaining insight into the world of politics, warfare, and the chivalric code. The squires were not just servants, but students. They learned horsemanship, a crucial skill for a knight, and practiced wrestling and hunting to enhance their physical strength and dexterity. They were taught to read and write in Latin and French, the languages of the court and church. Through these lessons, they acquired the knowledge and skills required to navigate the complex world of medieval society. As they grew older, squires were expected to accompany their knight to tournaments, an essential aspect of knightly life. These events were not just games, but a showcase of military prowess and chivalry. They were occasions for knights to test their martial skills, to earn glory, and to reinforce social bonds. For the squire, they were a chance to observe and learn, and sometimes to participate. In a tournament, knights would compete in events like jousting and melee combat. Squires would assist their knight, helping him don his armor, caring for his horse, and providing him with weapons. But squires weren't just spectators. They too had a role in the tournament. In some events, squires were allowed to compete, giving them a chance to show their own martial prowess. These were important opportunities for the squire, for if they performed well, they could attract the attention of other knights and lords, enhancing their reputation and prospects. Life as a squire was not all work and no play. There were times for leisure and entertainment, for songs and stories, for games and sport. Squires would often engage in mock battles and horse races, enhancing their skills while having fun. These activities, while certainly enjoyable, were also an integral part of their training, teaching them teamwork, strategy, and the art of war. As the squire grew older and more proficient in his duties, he would gradually take on more responsibilities. He might be asked to lead a group of younger squires, or to assist the knight in more complex tasks. These were signs that the squire was nearing the end of his training, that he was ready to take on the mantle of knighthood. The transition from squire to knight was not automatic. It was a privilege that had to be earned through years of service and dedication. When the knight felt that the squire was ready, he would recommend him for knighthood. This was a momentous occasion, one that was often accompanied by a grand ceremony. The night before the ceremony, the squire would take a ritual bath, symbolizing purification. He would then don a white tunic, representing purity, a red robe, symbolizing nobility, and black shoes, signifying death. During the ceremony, the knight would dub the squire, tapping each of his shoulders with the flat of a sword in a ritual known as the accolade. This was the moment the squire had been working towards, the moment he became a knight. But the ceremony did not mark the end of the knight's journey. Rather, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with responsibilities and challenges, with honor and glory. The newly made knight was now a member of the nobility, a defender of the realm, a champion of chivalry. He had earned his spurs, but the real test of his mettle was yet to come. As we continue our exploration into the life of a medieval knight, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment in the young squire's life. The day of his dubbing, the official ceremony that would elevate him to the status of a knight, had finally arrived. This was a day of great anticipation, a day where years of rigorous training, discipline, and dedication would culminate in a single, solemn ceremony. The ceremony of dubbing was a deeply spiritual and symbolic event. The night before the dubbing, the squire would partake in a ritual known as the Vigil of Arms. Here, the squire would fast and pray in a chapel, contemplating the gravity of the commitment he was about to make. This was a time for introspection, a time to reflect on the virtues of chivalry he was vowing to uphold. The squire would lay his armor and weapons on the chapel's altar, symbolically offering them to God. This act was a reminder that his strength and skill were not his own, but gifts bestowed upon him by a higher power. As dawn broke on the day of the dubbing, the squire would be bathed and dressed in symbolic garments. He would wear a white shirt as a symbol of purity, a red robe as a symbol of his willingness to shed blood for his cause, and black stockings to signify his inevitable death. Once dressed, the squire would make his way to the ceremony, where he would be greeted by a procession of knights and nobles. The ceremony itself was a solemn affair, filled with ritual and reverence. The soon-to-be knight would kneel before the Lord performing the dubbing, who would be seated on a raised platform. The Lord would ask the squire if he was prepared to uphold the chivalric code, to which the squire would respond affirmatively. The Lord would then tap the squire's shoulders with a sword in a gesture known as the accolade, officially conferring the status of knight upon him. Once dubbed, the new knight would be presented with his spurs, the symbol of his new status. The spurs, usually made of gold, were a mark of honor, signifying the knight's readiness to serve his lord and protect the realm. The knight would then be armed, first with his sword, then his shield, and finally his helmet. With each piece of armor, the lord would utter a blessing, imbuing the armor with symbolic significance and divine protection. The ceremony would conclude with a grand feast, where the new knight would be celebrated and welcomed into the fellowship of knights. Here, he would be seated at the high table, surrounded by his fellow knights, who would toast to his honor and pledge their loyalty and brotherhood. As the feast progressed, the new knight would be regaled with tales of past knights, their heroic deeds serving as inspiration and guidance for his own future exploits. Once the feast was over, the real work of being a knight began. The newly dubbed knight was now expected to serve his lord in times of war and to protect the weak and innocent in times of peace. He was expected to uphold the virtues of chivalry, to be brave, courteous, and generous, and to always conduct himself with honor. This was no small task, for the life of a knight was fraught with challenges and dangers, but it was also a life of great honor and responsibility, a life that could bring glory and renown to those who upheld its ideals. The life of a medieval knight was not an easy one, but it was a life that many aspired to. It was a life of service, of honor, and of courage. And for those who were able to persevere, to uphold the chivalric code, it was a life that could bring great rewards. But more than anything, it was a life that shaped the course of history, that left an indelible mark on the world. And so, as we continue our journey into the life of a medieval knight, let us remember the dedication, the commitment, and the courage that it took to don the mantle of knighthood. Let us remember the men who lived this life, who served their lords and protected their realms, who shaped the world with their deeds. And let us remember the legacy they left behind, a legacy of honor, of courage, and of chivalry. In the life of a medieval knight, the dawn of his martial career was marked by his squireship. This was a critical time, as it laid the groundwork for the rest of his life. A young man, usually around the age of 14, would leave his family to live in the household of a lord. This was a significant change, a transition from the comfort of one's family to the stern discipline of a lord's hold. He would begin his training under the watchful eye of an experienced knight who would serve as his mentor. The squire would learn not only the arts of war, but also the chivalric codes and social etiquette that would become the cornerstones of his identity. The day-to-day life of a squire was filled with both work and learning. His mornings would typically begin before dawn with prayers in the chapel. This was followed by an extensive training regimen that involved horse riding, archery, and swordplay. But his days were not all about martial training. He would also be expected to assist his knight in various duties. He would help him don his armor, care for his horses, and accompany him in hunts and tournaments. The squire would also be expected to serve at the lord's table during feasts and to attend to any guests. This was an important part of his education, as it taught him the social graces and etiquette of the nobility. However, squireship was not all work and no play. There were ample opportunities for leisure and enjoyment. The medieval knight's life was punctuated by grand tournaments, feasts, and hunts. These events were not just recreational. They were a crucial part of the knight's social life, allowing him to forge alliances and demonstrate his prowess. The squire, too, would participate in these events, often competing against other squires in mock tournaments. These events were not only a testing ground for their martial skills, but also provided them the chance to catch the eye of potential patrons. As the squire grew older and his skills improved, he would be given more responsibilities. He might be asked to lead a group of men in battle or to manage the lord's estates. This was a test of his leadership and administrative abilities, preparing him for his future role as a knight. The culmination of his training was the dubbing ceremony, where he would be officially recognized as a knight. This was a momentous occasion, filled with ritual and symbolism. The squire would be bathed, dressed in new clothes, and presented to the Lord. The Lord would then confer knighthood upon him by tapping him on the shoulder with a sword, a ritual known as the accolade. The newly dubbed knight would then be presented with his sword and spurs, the symbols of his new status. He would swear an oath of fealty to his lord, pledging his loyalty and service. And thus, the squire would officially become a knight, ready to embark on his new life. This was a moment of great joy and pride, not only for the knight, but also for his family and his mentor. It marked the successful completion of his training and the beginning of his career as a knight. This was an important milestone in a knight's life, a moment when he would step out from his mentor's shadow and begin to carve out his own identity. He would be expected to uphold the chivalric code, to protect the weak, and to serve his lord faithfully. He would also be expected to participate in wars and tournaments, to demonstrate his martial prowess and to win glory for his lord and himself. However, the life of a knight was not all about war and glory. There were also times of peace, when the knight would be expected to manage his estates and to perform various administrative duties. This was a different kind of challenge, requiring not just strength and courage, but also wisdom and diplomacy. The knight would need to balance the demands of his lord with the needs of his tenants to ensure prosperity and harmony in his lands. The knight's life was a complex and multifaceted one, filled with challenges and responsibilities. It required not just physical strength, but also mental resilience and emotional maturity. Despite the hardships and the risks, it was a life that many young men aspired to, drawn by the allure of honor, glory, and adventure. In the next section, we will explore the later years of a knight's life, a time of reflection and consolidation. We will look at the challenges and rewards of this period and how the knight navigated the twilight of his career. Whether in war or in peace, in youth or in old age, the knight remained a figure of fascination and reverence, a symbol of the ideals and aspirations of the medieval world. As we journey further into the life of a medieval knight, we find ourselves in the midst of the knighting ceremony. This pivotal moment in a squire's life is the culmination of years of training and preparation. The evening before the ceremony, the squire would take a ritual bath, symbolic of purification. Dressed in a white tunic to represent purity, red robes to symbolize the blood he was willing to shed for his lord and his people, and a black robe as a reminder of his eventual death, the squire would prepare himself for the solemnity of the occasion. During this time, he would pray and meditate, reflecting on his vows of chivalry, the responsibility that he was about to undertake, and the significance of his upcoming role in society. This period of vigil was meant to test his resolve, patience, and dedication. It was a time of quiet introspection and contemplation, a time for the squire to mentally prepare himself for the duties and obligations he was about to accept. As the dawn broke on the day of the ceremony, the squire, now clean in body and spirit, would be dressed in his finest attire, ready to take on his new role. He would make his way to the chapel where the ceremony was to take place, led by a procession of fellow knights and nobles. His family, friends, and the people of the kingdom would gather to witness this important event. The ceremony itself was a solemn affair, filled with religious symbolism and rituals. The priest would bless the sword, which was then laid on the altar. The squire would kneel before his lord, who would then present him with his spurs, shield, and finally, his sword. The future knight would swear an oath of loyalty to his lord, promising to uphold the ideals of chivalry, to protect the weak and defenseless, and to serve his lord faithfully. The act of dubbing, the moment when the squire officially became a knight was a symbolic gesture. The lord would lightly strike him on the shoulder with the flat of the sword, a symbolic blow to remind the new knight of his obligations and duties. This moment, known as the accolade, was a significant milestone in the life of a knight. It marked the transition from squire to knight, from student to master. Once the ceremony was concluded, the new knight would mount his horse, drawing his sword and holding it aloft as a symbol of his new status. He would then ride around the courtyard or the tournament field, showing off his new accoutrements to the assembled crowd. The people would cheer, celebrating the birth of a new knight, a new protector of the realm. The first few years of knighthood were often filled with challenges and trials. A newly dubbed knight was expected to prove his worth on the battlefield and in tournaments. He would be tested, not just on his combat skills, but also on his ability to uphold the ideals of chivalry and his loyalty to his lord. These were the years when the knight would truly come into his own, honing his skills, gaining experience, and earning his reputation. Many knights sought to distinguish themselves, either through acts of bravery on the battlefield or through their prowess in tournaments. The knight's reputation was his most valuable asset. A good reputation could earn him fame, wealth, and the respect of his peers. The life of a knight was not just about warfare and combat. He was also expected to be a model of chivalry, to be courteous, generous, and honorable. Knights were often called upon to act as judges in disputes, to protect the weak and the needy, and to set an example for others to follow. Despite the violence and brutality of their profession, knights were expected to uphold the highest standards of conduct, both on and off the battlefield. Life as a knight was fraught with dangers and challenges, but it was also filled with honor and glory. A knight was more than just a warrior. He was a protector, a leader, and a symbol of the ideals of chivalry. From the moment he was dubbed to the end of his life, a knight carried the weight of his responsibilities with pride and dedication. He lived his life in service to his lord and his people, striving to uphold the ideals of chivalry and justice, even in the face of adversity and hardship. In the life of a medieval knight, an integral aspect was the code of chivalry. This was not a written law, but rather a collection of expectations and ideals that shaped the knight's behavior and character. A knight was expected to be brave and courageous in battle, to serve his lord faithfully, and to uphold justice. He was also expected to be courteous, especially towards women, and to show generosity to the less fortunate. The code of chivalry also emphasized the importance of honor and reputation, and knights were expected to engage in acts of valor to maintain and enhance their standing. The chivalric code not only shaped the actions of knights during times of war, but also influenced their behavior during times of peace. Knights were expected to participate in tournaments, which were essentially mock battles that allowed them to showcase their skill and bravery. These tournaments were grand spectacles, often attended by nobles and royalty, and winning a tournament could greatly enhance a knight's reputation. Knights also engaged in the practice of courtly love, which was an idealized form of love that was often unrequited or unfulfilled. This form of love was typically directed towards a lady of higher social standing, often the wife of the knight's lord. Courtly love was characterized by secrecy, admiration from a distance, and a deep sense of respect for the lady. This practice was often romanticized in medieval literature, and it provided another way for knights to demonstrate their chivalry. The life of a knight was not all about warfare and chivalry, however. Knights also had responsibilities to their estates and their families. Many knights were also lords, which meant that they had lands and serfs to manage. They were expected to provide protection and justice for their people, and in return, they received labor and goods. Managing an estate was a complex task that required a good understanding of agriculture, economics, and local laws. Furthermore, knights had a duty to their families. Marriages among the knightly class were often arranged for political or economic reasons, and knights were expected to be faithful to their wives and to provide for their children. They were also expected to train their sons in the ways of knighthood, ensuring that the chivalric tradition would continue for another generation. The life of a knight was filled with contradictions. On one hand, they were warriors, trained to fight and kill in the name of their lord. On the other hand, they were expected to be paragons of virtue, upholding the ideals of chivalry and courtly love. They were managers of estates and leaders of men, but they were also servants, bound by their vows of fealty to their lord. Despite these contradictions, or perhaps because of them, the figure of the knight continues to fascinate us today. In the next section, we'll delve into the twilight years of a knight's life, examining how they navigated the challenges of aging in a society that valued physical prowess and martial skill. We'll also explore the legacy that knights left behind, both in terms of their tangible contributions, such as castles and fortifications, and their intangible contributions, such as the ideals of chivalry that continue to influence our culture today. As you drift off to sleep, let your mind wander through the grand halls of medieval castles, filled with the echoes of clashing swords and the whispers of courtly love. Let the tales of knights and chivalry guide you into a peaceful slumber, filled with dreams of valor and honor. As we navigate the intricate pathways of a medieval knight's life, we now find ourselves at the threshold of adulthood. The young squire, having spent years learning the arts of war and chivalry, now stands on the precipice of a life-changing moment. He's about to be dubbed a knight. This pivotal ceremony was of great significance in the Middle Ages, and it's here that we'll focus our attention in this part of our journey. The dubbing ceremony, or the accolade, was a rite of passage for any medieval squire. It was the culmination of years of rigorous training and preparation. The ceremony was often religious in nature, underlining the Christian morals that were considered the bedrock of knighthood. The night before the ceremony, the squire would participate in a vigil of arms. Here, he would pray and fast, preparing his mind and spirit for the solemn responsibility he was about to undertake. The squire would often bathe as a symbolic act of purification, and would be dressed in symbolic colours: white for purity, red for nobility, and black for death, a bleak yet stark reminder of the deadly nature of his profession. The actual ceremony was filled with symbolism and tradition. The future knight would kneel before the Lord, conducting the ceremony, presenting his sword in homage. The Lord would then strike the squire on the shoulder with the flat of the sword, a symbolic act known as the accolade. This dubbing was the moment of transformation, the precise point where the squire became a knight. Upon becoming a knight, the new warrior would be given his spurs, the ultimate symbol of his new status. These were not the ordinary spurs of a horseman, but rather a pair intricately decorated, often made of pure gold. The spurs were symbolic of the knight's commitment to his ideals, his duty to spur himself into action whenever injustice was afoot. The newly minted knight would then mount his horse, a powerful war horse specially trained for battle. This steed, often a gift from the Lord, was as much a part of the knight's image as his armor and his sword. It was a symbol of his strength, his courage, and his nobility. It was a partner in battle, a companion in his quest for honor and glory. Even after the dubbing ceremony, the knight's training didn't end. He would continue to hone his skills, mastering the art of war and chivalry. Daily drills, tournaments, and mock battles were a part of his life, ensuring that he was always ready for battle. The life of a knight was one of constant preparation, a never-ending cycle of training and fighting, all in the name of honor and duty. The knight was not just a warrior, but also a landowner and a lord in his own right. He was given lands by his liege lord, and from these lands, he drew his income. He was responsible for the protection and welfare of the people living on his lands, a responsibility he bore with the same sense of duty and honor that he brought to the battlefield. Despite the romantic image that history has painted of knights, it's important to remember that their lives were far from easy. They were expected to live by a strict code of behavior, the chivalric code, which demanded loyalty, courage, and honor. They were expected to be brave in battle, merciful in victory, generous to the poor, and respectful to all. It was a demanding life, one that required both physical strength and mental fortitude. As we delve deeper into the life of a medieval knight, we begin to understand the complexities and challenges of this unique way of life. From the moment of their dubbing, knights were thrown into a life of constant struggle and duty. Yet they bore these burdens with honor and courage, living up to the ideals of chivalry, even in the face of death. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore the life of a knight at war, a period that tested their courage, their skill, and their commitment to the chivalric code. As we continue, let these tales of bravery and honor guide you into a serene sleep, filled with dreams of valor and chivalry. As we delve further into the life of a medieval knight, we cannot overlook the significance of the knightly virtues, which were the moral and social code of chivalry. In the 12th century, the church sought to harness the warrior ethos of the knight and channel it towards religious ends. This gave birth to the concept of the chivalric knight, a warrior who was not just physically strong, but also morally upright. The knight's virtues were often depicted in medieval literature, influencing the societal perception of these warriors. These virtues included honesty, courage, loyalty, generosity, and courtesy. Honesty in this context meant a knight should always keep his word, never lie, and never cheat. The knight was expected to be courageous in battle, never fleeing from the enemy, and never showing fear. Loyalty was paramount. The knight was expected to be loyal to his liege lord and to his comrades in arms. Generosity referred to a knight's duty to be charitable to those less fortunate, while courtesy denoted a knight's expected behavior in social situations, showing respect to women and conducting himself with dignity and grace. Knights were also expected to demonstrate piety, showing reverence for the church and its teachings. This was a direct result of the church's influence on chivalry, and knights were often depicted as protectors of the church and its people. The knight's religious duties included attending mass and confession, and going on pilgrimage. Some knights even chose to become members of religious military orders, such as the Knight Templars or the Knights Hospitaller, serving both God and king. The training of the knight was not just physical, but also moral and spiritual. The knight's education included learning about the Christian faith and the virtues of chivalry. This education was often imparted by the church through priests and monks, who played a significant role in the upbringing of the knight. The chivalrous knight was also expected to be a patron of the arts, fostering the development of literature, music, and architecture. Many knights were themselves poets and musicians, composing songs and poems about love and war. Knights were also patrons of the visual arts, commissioning paintings and sculptures to decorate their castles and chapels. The knight's castle was not just a stronghold, but also a cultural centre, where artists and scholars gathered to create and share their works. Despite these lofty ideals, not all knights lived up to the standards of chivalry. Some knights were infamous for their cruelty and greed, exploiting the peasantry and engaging in acts of violence. These knights were often depicted as villains in medieval literature, serving as a contrast to the chivalrous knight. Life as a knight was not all about warfare and violence. There was also a significant amount of time devoted to leisure activities, Knights enjoyed hunting, falconry, and participating in tournaments. These tournaments were not just sporting events, but also social occasions, where knights could display their prowess and win honor and glory. The tournament was a microcosm of the knightly life, combining elements of warfare, chivalry, and courtly love. The life of a medieval knight was a complex blend of warfare, chivalry, and courtly love. It was a life of contradictions, where violence and brutality existed alongside honor and virtue. Yet despite these contradictions, or perhaps because of them, the figure of the knight continues to fascinate us, serving as a symbol of a bygone era when honor was worth more than life itself, and when a man's worth was measured by his prowess in battle and his adherence to the knightly virtues. As we delve further into the life of a medieval knight, we arrive at their experiences on the battlefield. The knight is often depicted charging on horseback, clad in shining armor, sword raised high. But the reality of medieval warfare was often far more complex. The knight was not just a warrior, but a symbol of bravery, honor, and chivalry, and the battlefield was the stage upon which these virtues were tested. The first thing we must understand about medieval warfare is that it was not a constant state of affairs. Periods of peace were just as common, if not more so, than periods of conflict. Knights spent much of their time training, maintaining their equipment, and managing their estates. However, when war did break out, the knight's role was crucial. On the battlefield, the knight was expected to lead. They were often positioned at the front of the army, acting as both a physical and moral bulwark against the enemy. The knight's role was not just to fight, but to inspire his men, to show them that bravery and honor could overcome fear and doubt. The knight's presence on the battlefield was a rallying point, a beacon of hope amid the chaos and carnage. Knights were often the ones to initiate the charge, a tactic that, when successful, could break the enemy lines and turn the tide of the battle. They rode on war horses, powerful and specially trained animals capable of carrying a fully armored knight at full gallop. These charges were a terrifying sight, a wall of steel and horseflesh bearing down on the enemy. Yet, they required careful timing and coordination. A charge launched too early could exhaust the horses and leave the knights vulnerable, while a charge launched too late could fail to break the enemy lines. Though the image of the knight charging on horseback is iconic, much of medieval combat actually took place on foot. Knights would dismount to fight in the melee, using swords, axes, and maces to engage the enemy at close quarters. The skill and training of the knight often made them a formidable opponent. Their armor, made of chainmail or later plate, provided excellent protection, while their shield could be used to both defend and attack. Yet for all their skill and equipment, medieval warfare was a brutal and dangerous affair. Knights were not invincible. They could be injured, captured, or even killed. The risk was part of the knight's duty, part of the code of chivalry they lived by. They were expected to face danger without fear, to risk their lives in the service of their lord and kingdom. Death on the battlefield was not considered a tragedy, but an honor. A knight who died in combat was said to have met a good death. They were often buried with full military honors, their graves marked with a cross or a statue of a knight in prayer. Their deeds were remembered in songs and poems, their names inscribed on the roll of honor. Yet, warfare was not just about glory and honor. It was also about strategy and tactics. Knights had to understand the lay of the land, the strengths and weaknesses of their own, and the enemy's forces. They had to know when to attack, when to defend, and when to retreat. They had to be able to adapt to changing circumstances, to make decisions under pressure, to lead their men with wisdom and courage. The life of a medieval knight on the battlefield was a balance of bravery and prudence, of honor and strategy. It was a life of service and sacrifice, of duty and devotion. It was a life that demanded much, but also offered much in return. The knight was a warrior, a leader, a symbol of chivalry. They were the embodiment of the medieval ideal, a beacon of hope in a time of uncertainty and change. As we delve deeper into the world of the medieval knight, we find ourselves in the heart of the Middle Ages, a time defined by chivalry, honor, and the clanging of steel. The life of a knight was far from easy, and it was a path only embarked upon by those with the courage to face the many trials and tribulations that lay ahead. An aspiring knight would typically begin his journey at a tender age, often no older than 7 years old. Sent away from his family, he would reside in the household of a lord or relative, where he would take on the role of a page. In this role, the young boy would perform various chores and tasks, whilst learning the basic principles of chivalry and knighthood. His days would be filled with rigorous training and lessons in everything from etiquette and courtly manners to horse riding and combat. The page would also be educated in religion, as faith played a crucial role in the life of a knight. At the age of around 14, the page would be elevated to the rank of squire. This was a significant step forward in the journey to knighthood and was marked by an increase in responsibilities and duties. The squire would serve directly under a knight, acting as his personal attendant. He would assist in the maintenance of the knight's armor and weapons, accompany him to tournaments and battles, and even serve him at the dining table. Despite the seemingly menial nature of these tasks, they served a crucial purpose. They allowed the squire to observe the knight closely in his daily life, learning firsthand the virtues and codes of conduct that defined a true knight. He would witness the knight's bravery in battle, his fairness in judgment, his piety in faith, and his courtesy towards ladies. The squire would also continue his physical training, which was now more intense and focused. He would learn to handle a variety of weapons, including swords, lances, and bows. He would practice jousting and participate in mock battles, honing his skills and preparing himself for the real challenges that lay ahead. The rank of knight was not simply handed to the squire when he reached a certain age. It was a title that had to be earned through a demonstration of skill, courage, and virtue. When his master deemed him ready, the squire would undergo the ceremony of knighthood. This was a deeply religious and symbolic event, often taking place in a church and involving a night-long vigil during which the squire would pray and prepare himself for the life that lay ahead. Upon his knighting, he would be presented with his armor and weapons, each piece symbolizing a different virtue. The helmet represented wisdom, the breastplate righteousness, the shield faith, and the sword the spirit of justice. Dressed in his new regalia, the newly knighted man would then take the oath of knighthood, pledging to defend the weak, uphold the law, and serve his lord faithfully. In the next section, we will explore the life of the knight after his knighting, focusing on his role in society, his duties, and the challenges he would face. But for now, let's take a moment to appreciate the incredible journey these young boys undertook, and the bravery and determination they demonstrated at such a young age. Their journey was not an easy one, but it was one that shaped them into the iconic figures we know today, the knights of the Middle Ages. As we delve deeper into the life of a medieval knight, we must examine the heart of their existence, their code of chivalry. The word chivalry itself comes from the French term chevalerie, meaning horsemanship. Knights were, above all, horsemen. They were skilled riders, trained to maneuver their steeds with grace and precision, even in the heat of battle. But the term chivalry came to represent much more than just equestrian prowess. It was a strict moral and ethical code that guided a knight's actions both on and off the battlefield. Chivalry dictated that a knight should be brave in battle, loyal to his lord and his comrades, and devoted to the church. But perhaps most importantly, it insisted upon a sense of honor and justice. A knight was expected to protect the weak and defenseless, to be generous and kind to his inferiors, and to always act with integrity. If a knight failed to uphold these values, he risked losing his status and reputation. The code of chivalry was the heart and soul of knighthood. It was what separated the true knights from mere soldiers or mercenaries. One of the most significant aspects of a knight's life was his religious devotion. Knights were deeply religious, and the church played a pivotal role in their lives. They were expected to attend Mass regularly and observe the holy days of obligation. Many knights took vows of chastity and poverty, renouncing worldly pleasures in the name of service to God. They saw their duty as a holy mission, a divine calling that required them to put aside personal desires and devote themselves entirely to the service of others. Knights were also expected to be patrons of the arts and letters. They were encouraged to learn to read and write, to appreciate poetry and music, and to engage in intellectual pursuits. The ideal knight was not just a warrior, but a scholar and a gentleman. He was well educated, cultured, and refined. He could recite poetry, play a musical instrument, and engage in sophisticated conversation. He was expected to be knowledgeable about the world and its affairs, to be curious and inquisitive, and to always seek to broaden his horizons. Being a knight was not simply a job or a profession, it was a way of life. It encompassed every aspect of a man's existence, from his moral and ethical conduct to his intellectual pursuits and his social interactions. It was a demanding and challenging lifestyle, but it was also one of great honor and prestige. Knights were held in high regard by society, and their status was one of privilege and respect. Training to become a knight was a rigorous and demanding process. Boys as young as 7 could be sent to serve as a page in a noble household, where they would learn the basics of horsemanship, weaponry, and chivalry. After several years, they would advance to the rank of squire, serving directly under a knight and assisting him in his duties. They would learn to care for the knight's horse and equipment, to follow him into battle, and to emulate his behavior and conduct. After many years of training and service, a squire could finally be knighted and join the ranks of the chivalrous elite. Knighthood was not for the faint of heart. It required strength, courage, and determination. It demanded unwavering devotion to a strict moral and ethical code. But for those who were willing to accept the challenge, it offered the chance to live a life of honor and glory, to serve a noble cause, and to make a meaningful contribution to society. It was a life of duty and sacrifice, but also one of honor and prestige. It was a life that was both challenging and rewarding, filled with danger and excitement, but also with joy and fulfillment. It was, in short, the life of a medieval knight. As we delve deeper into the life of a medieval knight, it is essential to examine the pivotal role that training played in shaping these esteemed warriors. The journey to knighthood began at a young age, often as early as 7 years old, when a boy was sent to a noble household to serve as a page. This was the first stage in his education, where he would learn basic manners, courtesy, and the social graces expected of a knight. He would also be introduced to the fundamentals of religious instruction and moral codes, which were indispensable in the chivalric ethos. From the noble household, the young page would observe the knights and squires, learning by imitation, aspiring to their prowess, and dreaming of the day when he too would don the armor of a knight. The page would help with the horses, clean the weapons, and assist in the everyday tasks of running the household. It was a rigorous, yet essential phase, providing the foundation for the page's future knightly duties. As the page grew older and stronger, usually around the age of 14, he would graduate to the rank of a squire. This was a significant milestone in the path to knighthood. As a squire, he would be entrusted with more responsibilities, such as carrying the knight's shield and additional weapons into battle. He would also assist the knight in donning his armor, a task which required strength and dexterity, given the weight and complexity of the medieval armor. Simultaneously, the squire's training would intensify. He would practice daily with various weapons, particularly the sword and lance, honing his skills for the battlefield. The squire would also learn to ride and control a horse while wearing armor, a challenging task that demanded physical stamina and agility. Mock battles, tournaments, and hunting expeditions served as practical training grounds where the squire could apply and test his skills. One aspect of the squire's education that often goes overlooked is the intellectual and moral training. The concept of chivalry was deeply entrenched in the knightly class. It was an ideal that combined martial prowess with virtues such as loyalty, honor, generosity, and piety. The squire would learn about these ideals not only through instruction, but also by observing the knights around him. The stories of legendary knights and their heroic deeds served as moral guides, illustrating the qualities a knight should possess. It was common for a squire to serve for 7 years before he could be considered for knighthood. However, in times of war, squires could be knighted earlier if they demonstrated exceptional bravery or skill in battle. The ceremony of dubbing to knighthood was a solemn and significant occasion, often associated with religious rituals. The prospective knight would spend the night in prayer and fasting. In the morning, he would confess his sins, take a purifying bath, and dress in symbolic white garments, signifying his purity and devotion. The actual ceremony of knighthood involved the would-be knight kneeling before a lord or another knight. He would swear an oath of loyalty and promise to uphold the ideals of chivalry. The lord or knight would then confer the accolade, a symbolic blow on the shoulder with the flat of a sword, after which the newly dubbed knight would be given his spurs, the ultimate symbol of his new status. Being a knight was an honor and a responsibility. It was a role that required physical strength, martial skill, and a deep understanding of the ideals of chivalry. The rigorous training, starting from the age of 7, molded the knight into a warrior, a protector, and a symbol of the highest ideals of medieval society. Despite the hardships and challenges for many, the path to knighthood was a journey worth undertaking, a chance to achieve honor, respect, and a place in the annals of history. As we continue to explore the life of a medieval knight, we will delve into the knight's role on the battlefield, his armor and weapons, and the impact of chivalry on medieval society. Each facet of the knight's life and role paints a detailed picture of the complexities inherent in this revered position. A knight was more than a warrior. He was a symbol of the values and ideals that shaped medieval society. It is through understanding these intricacies that we can truly appreciate the life and legacy of the medieval knight. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the stone walls of the castle, the life of a medieval knight would transition from the labors of the day to the duties of the evening. The great hall, where the knight had earlier taken his midday meal, would be abuzz with activity. The air would be filled with the aroma of roasting meat and baking bread, the chatter of servants, and the clatter of pots and pans. Here, the knight would partake in the evening meal, known as supper, a communal and often lengthy affair that offered the opportunity for relaxation and camaraderie after a hard day's work. Supper was an important part of a knight's day, as it was a time to replenish the energy expended during the day's activities. The meal was usually substantial, consisting of a meat or fish dish, bread, cheese, and sometimes a sweet pudding. Wine and ale would also be served, providing the knight with a chance to unwind and enjoy the company of his fellow knights. The food was often simple, but the conversation was lively, filled with tales of battle, discussions of strategy, and the latest news from the realm. After supper, the knight would have some free time to engage in various activities. Some knights might choose to spend this time in quiet contemplation, reading or praying in the castle's chapel. Others might opt for more physical pursuits, such as a game of chess or backgammon, or perhaps some light sparring to keep their skills sharp. The knight's time was his own, and he was free to use it as he saw fit. As the evening wore on, the castle would gradually quiet down. The fires in the hearth would be banked, the servants would retire to their quarters, and the knight would prepare for bed. The process of retiring for the night was not a simple one, as the knight would first have to remove his day clothes, which could be a laborious process, particularly if he had been wearing armor. He would then don his night clothes, typically a simple tunic and breeches, and retire to his bedchamber. The knight's bedchamber was a relatively modest affair, usually consisting of a bed, a chest for his personal belongings, and perhaps a small table and chair. The bed would be a simple wooden frame, with a straw mattress and a few blankets for warmth. Despite the simplicity of his accommodations, the knight would likely have been comfortable, as the room would have been heated by a small fire in the hearth. Sleep was an important part of the knight's routine, as it allowed him to rest and rejuvenate after the rigors of the day. The knight would typically sleep for about 8 hours, rising with the dawn to begin another day of service to his lord. The life of a medieval knight was not an easy one, filled with physical exertion, danger, and a strict adherence to the code of chivalry. Yet, it was also a life of honor, purpose, and camaraderie. Each day, from dawn to dusk, the knight would live his life in service to his lord and his kingdom, upholding the ideals of bravery, loyalty, and honor that were the cornerstone of the knightly code. As we continue our journey through the life of a medieval knight, we will delve further into the intricacies of his daily routine, exploring the trials and triumphs, the duties and delights that made up the life of these iconic figures of the Middle Ages. So, close your eyes, let your mind wander through the stone corridors of the castle, and imagine the life of a knight as we continue to explore the fascinating history of the Middle Ages. Sleep well, and dream of knights and castles, of honor and chivalry, and of a time when life was guided by a code of honor. The life of a medieval knight was not only about training and battles, it was also about the intricate social structures and codes of conduct that governed their everyday lives. Chivalry was the code of conduct that dictated how knights should behave. It was a set of ideals that combined Christian values with the military virtues of bravery, loyalty, and honor. The concept of chivalry was widely propagated and romanticized in the literature of the time, with tales of knightly heroism and courtly love capturing the imaginations of the medieval population. Being a knight meant, above all, being a Christian warrior. Knights were expected to protect the weak and defenseless, to give succor to widows and orphans, and to refrain from the wanton giving of offense. They were expected to fight for the welfare of all and to obey those placed in authority over them. The chivalric virtues were deeply ingrained into the psyche of the medieval knight, forming the core of his identity and his sense of self. In addition to their military and religious duties, knights also had a significant role in the social and political life of the medieval society. They were among the ruling elite and held significant power and influence. They were often called upon to serve as advisors to the king or the lord they served. Their counsel and their sword arm were highly valued, and they often played a crucial role in the decision-making processes of the kingdom. It wasn't all duty and warfare for the knights, though. They also had time for leisure and recreation. Tournaments were a popular pastime for knights. These were grand spectacles, often lasting for several days, where knights would compete in various contests of skill and bravery. Jousting was the most famous of these contests. It was a test of a knight's horsemanship and his skill with the lance. But there were also other contests, such as the melee, where groups of knights would fight each other in a mock battle, or the pas d'armes, where a knight would challenge all comers to combat. Knights also enjoyed hunting and falconry. These were not only recreational activities, but also important training exercises, helping to hone the knight's skills in tracking, stealth, and precision. Music and poetry were also part of a knight's education. Knights were expected to be well-rounded individuals, capable of appreciating and contributing to the arts. Courtly love was another important aspect of a knight's life. This was a stylized and idealized form of love, often extramarital, that was popularized in the literature of the time. Knights were expected to be devoted to their ladies, to serve them with loyalty and respect, and to perform deeds of valor in their honor. This was a highly romanticized and often unrealistic ideal, but it was a powerful cultural force that shaped the behavior and attitudes of the knights. Being a knight was a lifelong commitment. It was a role that came with great responsibility and required a high degree of personal discipline. But it was also a privileged position that offered opportunities for glory and honor. It was a challenging life, but for those who were called to it, it was a life that offered the chance to live out the ideals of chivalry and to serve a cause greater than themselves. This was the life of a medieval knight. It was a life of duty and devotion, of hardship and glory, of war and peace. It was a life that was deeply ingrained in the fabric of the medieval society, shaping its values and its ideals, its hopes and its dreams. It was a life that remains a powerful symbol of the chivalric ideal, a life that continues to inspire and fascinate us to this day. As we move into the next section, we will explore the twilight years of a knight's life and their role as elder statesmen and mentors to the next generation of warriors. In the autumn of their years, knights often found new purpose and meaning, proving that their contributions to society extended far beyond their prowess on the battlefield. As we delve deeper into the life of a medieval knight, we now turn our attention to a crucial aspect of their existence: the code of chivalry. The concept of chivalry was a moral, religious, and social code of knightly conduct. It was a set of ideals and responsibilities that governed the behavior of a knight. These ideals were often discussed in the literature of the Middle Ages, such as the famous Arthurian legends. The code of chivalry dictated that a knight should be brave in battle, loyal to his lord and comrades, and ready to defend the church. He was expected to be a paragon of virtue, demonstrating honesty, generosity, and courtesy. Above all, he was to be humble, recognizing that his skills and status were gifts from God, to be used in service to others. Knights were also expected to show respect and protect those who were weaker than themselves, particularly women and children. This aspect of chivalry was often romanticized in medieval literature, with tales of knights performing daring deeds to win the favor of a lady. But this was not just about romantic love. It was about honor and duty, about using one's strength and skill to uphold justice and protect the innocent. In addition to these moral and ethical expectations, the code of chivalry also had a practical aspect. It provided a set of rules for conduct in warfare. Knights were expected to respect the rights of prisoners, to avoid unnecessary violence, and to honor the terms of truces and treaties. They were also expected to show respect and courtesy to their fellow knights, even those on the opposing side. The training of a knight was not just about physical skill and martial prowess, but also about learning this code of chivalry. Young boys who were training to become knights would learn about these ideals from their mentors and teachers. They would be taught the rules of chivalry, and they would learn to value honor and duty above personal gain. The ideal of the chivalrous knight was not always met in reality. Knights were human after all, and they were subject to the same temptations and weaknesses as any other. There were certainly many instances where knights failed to live up to the high standards set by the code of chivalry. But the ideals of chivalry provided a benchmark, a standard to strive for. And there were many knights who took these ideals to heart and strove to live their lives in accordance with them. The code of chivalry had a significant impact on the culture and society of the Middle Ages. It influenced the way people thought about warfare, about honor, and about the responsibilities of those in positions of power. It also influenced the way people thought about gender and social roles. The ideals of chivalry promoted a particular vision of masculinity, one that valued strength, courage, and honor. But it also promoted a vision of femininity, one that valued virtue, modesty, and the need for protection. In conclusion, the life of a medieval knight was not just about fighting and warfare. It was also about living up to a set of ideals, about striving to be a paragon of virtue and honor. The code of chivalry was a crucial part of this, providing a set of guidelines that shaped the behavior and attitudes of knights. It was a code that demanded much, but it also offered a vision of a noble and virtuous life, a life of service and sacrifice. As we continue our exploration of the life of a medieval knight, we will delve further into the rituals and traditions that shaped their lives. We will look at the ceremony of knighthood, the importance of heraldry, and the role of tournaments in the life of a knight. But for now, let us take a moment to appreciate the complexity and depth of the chivalrous code, and the ways in which it shaped the life and identity of a medieval knight. As we delve deeper into the life of a medieval knight, the sun begins to set on our imaginary landscape. The orange glow paints a picturesque image of the castle, with its towering stone walls casting long shadows over its residents. The knights, returned from their day's training or perhaps a jousting tournament, would be preparing for the evening. The night held its own set of responsibilities and rituals that were no less important than the duties of the day. The evening meal, or supper, was a significant event in the life of a knight. After a long day of rigorous training, combat practice, or jousting matches, this meal was a much-deserved reprieve. The food eaten by knights was hearty and nutritious, designed to replenish their strength for the next day. Their diet was primarily composed of bread, meat, and vegetables, washed down with ale or wine. The knights would sit at a long wooden table in the castle's great hall, their places marked by their rank. The highest-ranking knights would sit closest to the lord of the castle, while the lower-ranked knights would occupy the farther ends of the table. During the meal, entertainment was provided in the form of minstrels playing lutes and singing songs of bravery and chivalry. These songs were not just entertainment, they were a form of education. Through the heroic tales sung by the minstrels, knights learned about the ideals of courage, loyalty, and honor. The music also served to lift their spirits after a strenuous day, allowing them to relax and enjoy the camaraderie of their fellow knights. Supper was also a time for conversation and planning. The knights would discuss the day's events, share stories of previous battles, or plan strategies for future engagements. This was a valuable time for the younger knights to learn from their more experienced counterparts. They would listen intently to the stories and advice, absorbing valuable knowledge that would help them in their future endeavors. After the meal, the knights would retire to their quarters for rest. However, rest did not always mean sleep. Many knights would spend their evenings in quiet contemplation or prayer. Their faith was an essential part of their life, providing them with moral guidance and spiritual strength. Knights would often pray to Saint George, the patron saint of knights, asking for his protection and guidance. The knights' quarters were simple and functional, reflecting their austere lifestyle. They would sleep on a straw mattress covered with a linen sheet. A wooden chest would hold their personal belongings, such as their clothing and armor. Despite the simplicity, these quarters were a private sanctuary for the knight, a place where they could find respite from their duties and responsibilities. Occasionally, a knight might be assigned night watch duty, a crucial task that involved guarding the castle from potential threats. This duty was often rotated among the knights, ensuring that everyone shared the responsibility. The night watch was a lonely and often tiresome task, but it was essential for the security of the castle and its inhabitants. As the night deepens, the castle would fall into a serene quietness. The knights, either on watch or in their quarters, would find themselves in a world separated from the hustle and bustle of the day. The stars would shine brightly above, a silent testament to the knight's unwavering dedication and commitment. Thus, the life of a medieval knight was not just about battles and glory. It was a life marked by discipline, duty, and devotion. The knights lived by a strict code of conduct, their days structured around their responsibilities and obligations. Despite the hardships and challenges, they carried out their duties with unwavering dedication, guided by their sense of honor and duty. As we leave this section of our exploration into the life of a medieval knight, we carry with us a deeper understanding of their world, a world marked by courage and commitment, where every day was a testament to their enduring spirit.